All of my hard work in the garden has paid off and I have so many tomatoes I need to harvest, and today I'm going to be making salsa and canning it.
We are Alex and Elaina, a couple in our mid-20s working towards financial independence and self-sustainability.
Follow our journey as we grow, build, fix, and learn the skills we need to get us there. Before you get started canning, you need to make sure that you have the proper setup and also a recipe to follow by. It's really important that you have a recipe that you're following because these are tried and true methods of safely canning food. You can find some for free on the USDA website, but I went ahead and purchased this ball canning preserving book at Walmart. I think it was about $12, so it was really relatively cheap. And so I'm going to be making a salsa recipe from here. For the recipe I'm using, I need a water bath canner, the rack for the water bath canner, a funnel to get the recipe into the jars, and then this handy dandy tool that you use to get the jars in and out of the water safely without burning your hands. You can find water bath canners all over. I think we ordered this one off Amazon. It was a kit and it came with everything that we needed. So the first step for canning any type of tomato is that you need to prep the tomato itself. A lot of recipes will call for the skins to be removed from the tomato, so that requires blanching. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be rinsing all the tomatoes, and then I'm going to be cutting off any blemishes. You can see here a lot of my tomatoes are split from rain, and so I'll be cutting all of that off, and then I'm going to core them. So that's where you take out that white core portion of the tomato, and then I'm going to blanch them. So without further ado, it's time for me to tie up my hair and get ready to can. The first thing that you need to do with your tomatoes is you need to cut out the blemishes. So for me, I prefer to use a serrated knife for this job. Other people would rather use a sharp paring knife, but this is what I find is easiest to cut through the skin of the tomato. So all I do is, in this case, since this is split here, I just cut this out at the same time that I'm coring the tomato. So I cut around here and I'm cutting at an angle. So if you see my knife, it is at an angle, and that way I'm not cutting out more meat of the tomato than I have to. So just like that, I cut out my blemish, I cut out the core, throw it in the compost pile, and now I have this tomato that is ready to be blanched. Before I started prepping the tomatoes, I went ahead and filled a pot with water and turned on the heat so that I could get it to boiling when I'd be ready to blanch these tomatoes. I also went ahead and got my ice water bath ready. So all this is a large bowl with some ice and water, and I'll be using that for blanching as well. I like to put as many tomatoes as I can in the hot water at once. The water does not need to be boiling. You'll just keep those tomatoes in there for about 1 minute. It doesn't have to be exact, but you'll visibly see the skins falling off. The tomatoes have been in the boiling water for about 1 minute. You can see if I bring this close that the skins are already coming off. Now I'm just going to go ahead and drop this in the ice water bath so that I can cool them off before removing the skin. What I'll do is I take the tomato, pull off the skin. Comes off really easily. I'm going to take the skin and place it in my compost pile over here, and then you can choose to go ahead and do that and then cut the tomatoes, or you can cut them right away. The specific recipe that I'm using calls for chopped tomatoes. So now that my tomatoes have been blanched, the skins have been removed, I'm gonna go ahead and chop these until I get 4.5 cups. I'm definitely gonna have some leftover tomatoes, so I plan to make sauce out of the rest. The salsa recipe that I'm using calls for onion and jalapeno peppers. So while I prep those veggies, I'm gonna go ahead and prep the water bath. So I have turned this heat on and I'm getting it to a boiling level. And what I'm gonna do is put all of the jars that I plan on using in the water bath for 10 minutes. This helps sanitize the jars as well as get them up to the proper temperature. So once that 10 minutes is up, you don't want to pull them out and let them cool down. The idea is that you keep them really, really hot while you fill them so that there's not a huge temperature difference when you put the jars back into the water. The recipe I'm making calls for chopped jalapeno peppers, so now I'm gonna go ahead and chop these up. Anytime you're dealing with hot peppers, I recommend that you use a different cutting board and some type of glove to protect your hand from the juices. This may seem a little bit silly, but those juices will stay on your hands for quite some time. And I once made the mistake of dealing with hot peppers during the day and then proceeding to take out my contacts that night, and it burned my eyes. So you really want to be careful and take precautions when you're dealing with hot peppers. The recipe that I'm making also calls for some minced garlic, which I have already chopped up, and some spices. So I have some oregano, salt, cumin, and cilantro. And then lastly, it calls for some apple cider vinegar. So I already have all this measured out, and I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in my pot for cooking. Alright, so my jars have been in the boiling water for 10 minutes. They're ready to be filled. My salsa has been cooking for 10 minutes, so I'm going to ladle the salsa into the jars and you'll follow the process. Whenever you are filling your jars, you want to make sure that you leave headspace. So depending on what kind of vegetable you're canning or fruit, your headspace will vary. The recipe should call it out. Once you ladle everything into your jars, you want to make sure that you have the correct headspace. So my headspace is a 1/2 inch. This is just about right. They sell tools that you can use to measure. But one of the other things you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't have any air pockets in your salsa, because that will cause it to go bad. So check that. This spatula came with the kit that we bought. Once you do that, you want to make sure you wipe all of the rims clean, because you want to make sure that you get a really good seal when you go to can. So on this one I can see there's a bunch of junk. So I'm going to make sure I get the inside here as well as the top. I just want to point out that this jar here did not have enough salsa to fill it to the proper level. So because of that, this is going to be refrigerator salsa for us and stuff for us to eat right now. Look at how good that looks. Then you put your lids on top. These need to be brand new lids. You cannot reuse lids because it won't seal properly. So you go ahead and put those on top here. And then you take your rings for your jars and you put them on top and you just hand tighten them. So just hand tighten. You don't want to do too tight because you need to let them seal properly. Once you do that, these are ready to go in the water bath. So you're gonna grab them like this. So once your cans are in there, your recipe will tell you how long they need to process. For this specific recipe I'm using, they need to process for 15 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the timer on the stove. Once your cans are done processing, you'll pull them out to let them cool. As they cool, they will begin sealing. This jar here is sealed. You can tell by this small dimple on the top, it is facing inwards. Now this one is one that I didn't can, but you can see that there is a raised dimple on this one, and when I press on it, it makes a popping noise. So this one is not sealed. This is what you want. You want it to be sealed where it doesn't make a popping noise when you tap on it. Thank you so much for joining me while I can some salsa. Make sure to click the thumbs up if you like this video and subscribe to our channel for more.